Welcome, everybody, to the Cover 2 podcast. I am Nick Nenad.
And I'm Jared Smith.
And boy, do we have a power-packed podcast for you today. Lots of football, lots of Lakers talk on this podcast. Boy, was it a crazy week 2, both on the field and off the field. So many things to discuss. This podcast is going to go a lot like last week's podcast, where we are going to pick 2 games from week 2. We're going to discuss those each. We're not going to overlap. We're going to do this in a concise timing way. And then we will also, a little later on in the podcast, pick 1 game each from week 3 to look forward to, as well as a discussion on the Chiefs and Ravens. Because, Jared, we got to talk about the Chiefs and Ravens, right?
No doubt.
That huge Monday night game. We'll also dive into the injuries. We have to, right? So many big-time stars, so many teams affected by not just normal injuries, major injuries. Lots of guys torn ACLs. There's stadiums being blamed for this. There's the offseason. There's COVID, everything. And at the end of the podcast, like I mentioned, we will discuss the Lakers-Nuggets series. We right now are recording about an hour until tip-off for Game 3. So if you see us rushing a little bit later, it's because the Laker game is about to start. We want to watch it. So
I'm out of here. At 6 o'clock, I'm out of here.
100%. So yeah, we got good amount of time still to talk on this podcast. Jared, let's get into it. Week 2, it was crazy. I'll let you go at it. What game do you want to pick from this last week? What excited you the most about week 2?
I mean, listen, come on. I have to talk about my boys, right? Now, I usually don't, and we usually try to be, unbiased. And just like last week, I kind of let you take the Cowboys and I took the Cardinals because we don't. But I'm sorry. After that game and after that roller coaster ride of me almost having a heart attack from them coming back, I have to talk about this game. And, the big discussion has been, did the Cowboys actually win the game or did the Falcons lose the game? So for those that didn't see the game, it started out great if you're an Atlanta Falcons fan. I mean, in the first quarter, it was 20-0, and the Cowboys were like stunned. It was like, what just happened? Well, the Cowboys fumbled the ball 4 separate times in the first quarter, and it resulted in 3 turnovers. They ended up getting one of those fumbles back. Ezekiel Elliott fumbled, Dak Prescott fumbled, and then their backup tight end, Dalton Schultz, fumbled. Tony Pollard, the backup running back, fumbled as well, but he was actually able to recover his own fumble. It was like Butterfingers. I was like, guys, what happened? Like, did you guys, what gloves are you guys wearing? Well, I was mind-boggling. It's one thing to see, a fumble happen early part of the game, jitters, all that type of thing, but to see 4 fumbles in the first quarter and then the Cowboys go down 20-0, it was just like, well, I'm just going to start drinking. I mean, there's not much else to do, right? The Cowboys can't stop anything, right? They're giving the Falcons great field position. They can't keep the ball to save their life. And that, I was like, okay, this game's over. I'm still going to watch, but this game is basically over. And somehow, some way, this Cowboys team kept fighting and kept fighting and kept fighting. Now, I will, I'll talk about the Cowboys in a minute. I do want to give Atlanta credit because every time the Cowboys scored, whether it was a touchdown or a field goal, Atlanta would respond with their own set of points, right? I believe from the first to the third quarter, Atlanta scored on like 8 of their 9 possessions. I mean, they couldn't be stopped. They were just on fire, right? And the Cowboys defense couldn't stop a nosebleed. It was pathetic, to say the least. And so Dallas basically had to start scoring. So then it became somewhat of a shootout, even though it wasn't, a tie game back and forth scoring change. The Cowboys finally got their rhythm eventually, started to score some points, and Atlanta kind of simmered off a little bit. One of the biggest plays of the game, I'm sure you saw this, Nick, it was like a 3rd and 2, and Atlanta, for some reason, decided to put their quarterback, Matty Ice, out at the receiver position, and Russell Gage, who is a wide receiver, their 3rd receiver on the team, played quarterback in high school. He took the snap and threw an absolute bomb to Julio Jones, who literally just dropped it. I mean, it was right in his breadbasket. Like, Matt Ryan could not have put that ball in a better spot, and Julio Jones simply dropped it. And from that point on, it was kind of like a turning point. It was like, okay, Dallas, this is an opportunity for you guys to get the ball back and go down and score again. So it was simply amazing, man. I really, it's tough to even put into words. Obviously, the biggest play of the game was that onside kick. First of all, Nick, I don't know, in the years that you've been watching football and all the onside kicks you've seen, have you ever seen an onside kick without the T?
You know what? I feel like I have. You know what I haven't seen though, Jared, is an entire NFL hands team not know the rules in the NFL, because that's what happened. The Falcons didn't know football rules on that play. It was it was so dumbfounding to see the Falcons make that mistake. I wanted Dallas to win. I think Dallas is going to win. Teams can't be this dumb.
You don't understand. I'm sweating bullets over here. By this time, I'm a couple drinks in, right? Yeah. I'm like cursing at the TV. I'm like, what are they doing, right? First of all, it's I believe the percentages are less than 10% that the team that tries the onside kick actually recovers the football. So obviously the odds were not in Dallas's favor. And then to see this guy kicking the football off of the ground, and it's I guess it's called the watermelon kick. Don't know where that name came from, but that's what it is. And then, to see all the Atlanta players just standing there, almost like they were boxing each other out. It's like, wait, guys, you can go get the ball, right? I'm sitting there like, Atlanta, why are you not getting the ball, right? And then the Dallas player falls on it, and it's just like, oh my gosh, they have a chance if they can get about 10 to 15 more yards to get in the field goal range. That's exactly what they did. Really quickly, because I do want to get your thoughts on this game because it was just so crazy.
Yeah.
The Cowboys won, right? A win's a win, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. I'm a little disturbed, even going back to last week's game in week 1 where the Cowboys lost to the Rams, with some of the decision-making that head coach Mike McCarthy, is choosing to do out there. And what I mean by that is, in this game in particular against the Falcons, when Dallas was down by, they were down by 15, I believe, with 5 minutes left. They scored a touchdown. Now, analytics told them to go for 2 in that moment, right? So if you go for 2 and you make it, you are now down by 7.
Yeah.
If you go for 2 and you miss it, you are down by 9, which means you are down 2 scores, right? You have to have 2 possessions. I don't understand why they did not kick the extra point and then guarantee themselves it being a 1 possession game, right?
Yeah.
And people are saying, well, if you go for 2 and you make it, then you automatically know what you have to do in order to win the game. And
That's
it's like
the same thing. It's the same thing the other way too.
I'm not the smartest dude in the world, but if the Cowboys were to kick the extra point and go down by 8, isn't that knowing exactly what you have to do at that point?
Yeah.
All you have to do is get right. So that logic to me was mind-boggling. I was cursing at the TV, texting friends back and forth, like, what are we doing going for 2 in this situation? So some of the decision making by head coach Mike McCarthy, I'm not really behind, and is I'm a little skeptical going forward, right? Like I said, a win is a win, and it's great. I'm hoping that the Cowboys can ride this momentum because they have to go into Seattle next week, which is going to be a big game. Seattle coming off of a big win against the Patriots. But just a crazy game. Nick, give me your thoughts just quickly before you go on to your game.
I mean, like you're mentioning, a lot of boneheaded plays in this game, and usually, a team has to win. Yes, in the NFL you can tie, but even in the dumbest circumstances of any NFL game, some team has to win, and that was Dallas. If I'm a fan of the Cowboys like you are, Jared, or if I'm a fan of the Falcons, I don't like this game at all. Like, I don't like, especially the Cowboys losing week 1 to the Rams, not scoring that many points, having had the number 1 offense last year, and then coming into this week and fumbling away to get the game, essentially making a comeback, and then getting lucky with the onside kick and capitalizing. I mean, realistically, Jared, if the Falcons just know the rules of the NFL, the Cowboys come back and all are 0-2, and the Falcons now are 0-2 because of that bonehead play on the end line. McCarthy, what you were talking about with the decision making, yes, that whole, NFL analytics are interesting because we are going to see some of those very interesting calls. This is going to be a crazy reference, but I watched a Kansas football game. They're coached by Les Miles, the former LSU head coach. He did that a couple times, down 15 as well, where he went for 2. Unfortunately, they didn't get it. So then they were down by 2 possessions still. They were down by 9. And like you're saying, that boneheaded mistake ends up happening. So I think when you look at McCarthy and the Cowboys, there's going to be still some getting used to. And this is where COVID kind of comes into this. If McCarthy and Prescott and all the rest of the Cowboys have a normal training camp, I think they come out a lot better. And they're probably 2-0. Realistically, they probably would have beat the Rams, and they probably would have, or they still would have beat the Falcons at least more handily. I'm not too concerned about the Cowboys. If this continues for another 2-3 weeks, I am. But a win is a win, and the NFC East is just not good this year.
No, it's not.
The Cowboys can afford to make these mistakes early, watching the Eagles and Washington and New York. We'll get to New York and what happened with them. They have no chance now. But the Cowboys are fine. Falcons, Dan Quinn, not so much.
Let's see.
I just mentioned actually, no, I'm not going to do that game. Speaking of results that shocked me, as far as that Cowboys win, when you looked at it earlier, seeing them down 20-0 and then seeing them win at the end. Jared, what the hell is going on with the Minnesota Vikings? This was a team so far in week 2 or going into week 3. I am absolutely wrong about the Minnesota Vikings. They've looked awful 2 weeks in a row now. A big loss to the Packers, a division rival, a team that they're going to be battling for first place if they even have that chance this season. They gave up 40 points. They're supposed to have a good defense. They come back. You totally expect Minnesota to come out and beat average Indianapolis Colts team. Phillip Rivers coming off a bad loss. What do? They lose by 17 and score 11 points. I mean, I don't know what's going on with them, but they need to fix it fast because they play the Tennessee Titans next week. And although the Tennessee Titans have had they're 2-0, they've had relatively easy opponents they've played so far. So they're good. I don't know if they're great like they were last year in the playoffs, but Minnesota, they're going into a must-win territory now with how good Green Bay is. I don't know what's going on there. Is it Stefanski? Is it Kirk Cousins? Is it the defense? Jared, can you answer this question? Because this is almost me posing it to you. What is going on with the Vikings?
I'm going to read one stat line for you, and that should tell you all you need to know about this game. Minnesota passing.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins, 11 completions on 26 attempts, 113 yards total for the game.
Awesome.
Right? Not like first quarter, first half, 113 yards for the game. 4.3 yards averaging, right? Most teams average that running the football.
Yeah.
The Minnesota Vikings averaged that passing the football this past Sunday. 0 touchdowns. 3 interceptions, right? Just turn the ball over. 3 sacks, resulting in minus 18 yards. And I don't know if I've ever seen this since QBR has become a thing. A 9.4 QBR rating.
Oh my God.
Not 9.4.
Serious?
That stat line right there is all you need to know about why Minnesota lost. I don't want to hear about potential injuries. I don't want to hear about the head coach. I don't even want to hear about the Colts defense, right? You can give them credit because they had 3 interceptions, sacked Kirk Cousins 3 times. I could have gone out there and put up that stat line.
You're not wrong.
For 100 yards, threw 3 interceptions, and got sacked 3 times. I mean, Cousins is stealing money from the Minnesota Vikings right now. That's all I need to say. That guaranteed contract that he got 2 years ago, he is absolutely stealing money from the Minnesota Vikings. He should be arrested and charged and forced to give back that money because that is just awful. I mean, Minnesota, if they keep this up, Minnesota's going to be in the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes and or Justin Fields sweepstakes. I'm telling you that right now. It is not looking good, right? Dalvin Cook is the only saving grace on that team. And he had a mediocre. I mean, he ended up scoring a touchdown in the fourth quarter. It was, this game should have been 28-3. But he had 14 carries for 63 yards and got that touchdown at the end. I mean, Dalvin Cook is the only thing that is, that interests me about this team. Everything else is pathetic.
Yeah, I mean, they have the Titans, who have a very good defense this week. Week 4, they're at Houston. You got to expect Houston's better. They play 2 tough opponents. Then they're at Seattle. Like, it doesn't get any easier in the next couple games, and that's why I think this is a must-win in Week 3. We'll get to Week 3 a little bit later, but Minnesota's not playing good, and I will admit right now, I was wrong on the Vikings to begin this season. Jared, take it away with another game.
Yeah, another game, and this one was, it's a division rival. Many people expected this team to win, just not in that as close of fashion. Kansas City Chiefs traveling to face the LA Chargers. The Chargers opening up their home stadium, SoFi Stadium, for the first time. And an unexpected surprise literally happened moments before the game started when starting quarterback Tyrod Taylor had to basically leave the field because he had chest issues during warmups. And Justin Herbert, the first-round draft pick of the Chargers this year, said that he literally did not find out he was starting until minutes before the game, right? It's almost like that's why you practice as if you are the starter, because let's say Justin Herbert wasn't doing that and he was kind of taking it easy. I mean, he would have went out there and gotten lit up, right? But I think once I kind of show you, his numbers that he had, it will prove, that he was prepared and ready to play. But just very interesting start to this game. And, the Chargers came out fired up, whether it was them playing at home, even though they weren't playing in front of their fans. It's a new stadium. They're not playing in that soccer stadium anymore, right? So it's actually an NFL stadium that they get to play football in. But Justin Herbert, 311 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. I mean, for your first game ever, and like I said, finding out minutes before the opening kickoff, that is a huge win for this team. I also want to give credit to the Chargers defense that held Kansas City to 23 points. This game ended up going into overtime, and Kansas City had to win on the last minute 58-yard field goal. But this Chargers defense is for real, right? Joey Bosa, Melvin Ingram, Derwin James, the all-pro safety, is a big loss for them. But they've got playmakers at all 3 levels of this defense, and they're going to be, a force to be reckoned with. But listen, when you have Patrick Mahomes and the host of weapons that he has, you can never count this team out. And they were never, down by double digits or anything like that. But it's just, if you let the Chiefs hang around, Patrick Mahomes is going to do his thing eventually. He's eventually going to get hot. That's exactly what they did. He found Tyreek Hill for like a streaking 58-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter. And it was almost just like the Chiefs are going to win this game, right? You just kind of knew somehow, some way, Patrick Mahomes is going to find a way to get his team in field goal position, and that's exactly what happened. A very entertaining game. There's never any of those, like good losses. Like a loss is still a loss. But if you're the Chargers, I think you have to be excited about the fact that that you got, Justin Herbert. He came in and played so well. Now, I do want to mention Anthony Lynn, the head coach of the Chargers, did say that when Tyrod Taylor is healthy, he will be back, starting to play. I don't necessarily know if I like that. After seeing what Justin Herbert did, it's like, why not stick with the kid? You know what you have in Tyrod Taylor, right? Tyrod Taylor is a perennial backup, right? He's a great locker room guy, very well respected, very knowledgeable, right? He's been around and been in many systems. He can be there to kind of help educate Justin Herbert, but you know what he is. He is a bridge quarterback at best. Why not start Justin Herbert and see what this kid's got? Nick, what do you think?
Well, it's interesting because what you just said is what you get from Tyrod. He's a bridge. And I think what Anthony Lynn is thinking here is that he still wants Herbert to be, quote unquote, bridged by Tyrod Taylor. He wants to treat him like Patrick Mahomes, like Aaron Rodgers, where you don't just get thrown into the fire. Funny enough, irony included, he did get thrown into the fire, but that's not the way, ever normally that would happen, right? I don't mind whatever the Chargers do this year. I'll just say that because I think it works out in the future. Keeping Herbert back, teaching him a full year of Chargers football, a full year of a Chargers playbook. And I like if they play him because I think that the AFC in general is a more wide open conference than, say, the NFC. So the Chargers still can make the playoffs, But I think if they play Tyrod and they don't make it, maybe the Raiders and the Chiefs make it, I don't think you're too mad if you're a Chargers fan because you know who's sitting back there for next year, and that's Justin Herbert. So to be honest, it's an interesting discussion point, but I actually don't really mind whatever the Chargers do. I think they'll be successful in the future no matter what. What I do know after that game is that Justin Herbert is for real. And remember when he was supposed to be the number one pick even before last year, in the draft before last year, he's proving that right now, which is pretty cool. All right, moving on to the last topic of week 2. 49ers and Jets had a very interesting game Sunday. And so, again, if you didn't see it, there was a lot of injuries in the NFL. If there was one team that was affected more than others, it was definitely the San Francisco 49ers. They lost Solomon Thomas to a torn ACL. They lost Nick Bosa to a torn ACL in this game. They lost Jimmy Garoppolo, in the second half. And they also lost their starting running back, Raheem Mostert. Remember him? He almost had 300 yards in the playoffs in the NFC Championship game last year. And the 49ers still won by 18. So this is not about the 49ers, because we're going to get into the 49ers in a second with all those injuries. This is about the New York Jets, okay? Adam Gase has got one more game, Jared. He's got one more game under his belt. The fans have had enough of the Jets. There's rumors of the ownership kind of, keeping Gase around for ulterior motives and stuff like that. This is just not good in New York. I mean, the Giants already are awful, right? And now you got the Jets, who somehow have become the worst NFL team in the league. And they don't even have a bad quarterback either. I feel so bad for Sam Darnold, but offensive guru Adam Gase has not gone over 300 yards this year in a single game. The Jets have averaged 15 points per game. And the 49ers, Jared, didn't have Sherman. They lost Bosa, and they lost Solomon Thomas in that game. How does that happen? Like, Adam Gase... They
also didn't have George Kittle.
Exactly. Well, I was talking about the defense, though. Why this offense can't score.
Right.
Yeah, and then you look at the defense. They gave up 31 points without Jimmy G, without Mostert, without Kittle, without Brandon A. Like, what is – Deebo Samuel wasn't there. Like, what is going on? And all that means when I say what is going on is that they need to win next week, or Adam Gase, he's out of there. And that's all I'm just going to say with that. The Jets are a mess, and I feel bad for Sam Darnold, and they need to make a switch as soon as possible, because this is the worst situation in the NFL, and you cannot be losing by 18 when teams' guys are dropping like flies on the other sideline. It just cannot happen.
You want to know when this game was over? We do got to move on. This game was over after the first play. 49ers got the ball. First play of the game, Raheem Mostert runs 80 yards untouched for a touchdown. Yeah. First play of the game.
Yeah.
80-yard touchdown. Untouched. No one came close to him. His jersey was clean.
Yeah.
Touchdown. Game was over right then and there.
It's not good in New York, Jared. It's not good in New York right now. All right, so we do want to transition into our next segment, and it flows. We're going to talk about injuries now, and we'll start with the San Francisco 49ers. We're both going to discuss this, and we're going to kind of get into singularly talk like we just were a second ago in the next couple players and teams. Jared, I just talked about the 49ers, what happened. Now, what are your thoughts about what this is going to do for the 49ers? Because they win a game against the worst team in the league. They already lost to the Arizona Cardinals in week 1. Kittle is supposed to come back, but now they have Sherman on IR, Deebo Samuel on IR, Bosa is out for the season, Thomas is out for the season, Jimmy G's like what? How do the 49ers recover, or do they recover?
Do they recover is a great question, right? And fortunately, they have a great head coach, a great general manager. They have a great system in place, right? It's almost like it's that next man up mentality, but there's so much confidence in that next man up that this team it just flows, right? And it doesn't really matter who's in the game. So I'm looking at their schedule right now, and the 49ers are staying in New York because they have to play the Giants in the same stadium on that same turf again next week. Now, I do know that San Francisco has reached out to the NFL to try to see what they can do as far as changing out that turf, because losing the players that the 49ers lost, I would be, if I was the 49ers owner or GM or even coach, I would be doing everything in my power to make sure that when they play the Giants next Sunday, it is a different field than they were playing on last Sunday. So they've got the Giants in New York. Then they go home to face the Eagles. Then they're actually home for 3 straight games: Eagles, Dolphins, Rams. And then the schedule starts to pick up a little bit with the Patriots, the Seahawks, and the Packers. So basically, I think it depends on when these players come back. Obviously, we know that Joey Bosa and Solomon Thomas are out for the year with torn ACLs, right? They're not coming back. When is George Kittle going to come back? Potentially, how long will Jimmy Garoppolo be back? Is it a high ankle sprain? High ankle sprains are usually 4 to 6 week injuries. If it's lower ankle, really it's kind of pain tolerance and how much how much mobility he really has. Where Mostert supposedly has an MCL sprain. Now those are tricky. Is he going to be able, if he does play this week, is he going to be able to cut and have that same strength in that leg, or is it better to rest him for a week or two? Like you already mentioned that Brandon Ayuk was on the IR, Richard Sherman. So I think it just depends on when these guys can come back. And let's also preface this by saying that because of everything that's gone on this year with COVID and the new rules, putting a player on IR, the injured reserve this year, is only a 3-week injured reserve. Typically, injured reserve was, the entire season, and each team was able to bring back 1 player after 8 weeks. But because of everything going on this year, if you're put on injured reserve, you can come back after the 3rd week. So, if the 49ers can get some of these guys healthy in the next couple of weeks, I think they can get by beating the Giants. The Eagles are 0-2. They don't look like a good team. The Dolphins, obviously, we know who the Dolphins are, not good. So if they can get a couple guys back, within the next 2 to 3 weeks, then when they play the Rams, the Patriots, the Seahawks, hopefully by then they've got their starters back. So I'm not gonna, I still think they're a very good team and they will continue to contend, barring any major setbacks from their current injuries.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting with the 49ers, Jared. You make a lot of good points there with the way IR works. It is different. We're telling you everybody's on IR, but that doesn't mean as much as it would have, like, literally every other year in the NFL. It's interesting with them, and I think the biggest blow here, Jared, I think you can agree with me on this, is the defensive line. Because that was the strength of the 49ers. And when you're taking the strength away from a team, that really, really hurts because it's hard to game plan after that, right? You can talk about Mostert and the running game and all that stuff. You can talk about Jimmy G, but Jimmy G is already lost. I mean, he lost the game against the Cardinals in a lot of ways on his last drive. He made a lot of bad throws, a lot of bad decisions. So losing Jimmy G is probably actually the best injury out of all of them because I think, was it Jeff Driscoll? I think they'll be able to weather the storm with quarterback versus the lowly Giants and the lowly Eagles and the lowly Dolphins, right? Like the schedule does work out for them. If Jimmy G's not back for, yes, you said Rams, Patriots, Seahawks, I think there's no chance they make the playoffs because they're not winning those games. But they actually can weather the storm here. It's more down the road. Are they a Super Bowl team without Nick Bosa and Solomon Thomas and possibly Richard Sherman? Absolutely not. There's just no way I can say that. And it's sad about Nick Bosa because he's one of the best players in the NFL. It's sad if you're not an NFC West fan. But we don't want to cheer injuries here, but nonetheless, it's going to be interesting to see how this team recovers in the next couple of weeks. But I don't know. I think those injuries on defense are a little bit too much.
Yeah, it's tough, man. Like I said, if I'm the 49ers, I'm not going back onto that field unless it's a different turf. There's no way. I'm not putting my team on that field.
Yeah, no.
I'm not doing it.
Definitely interesting to see what's going on with MetLife Stadium there. All right, so another team that was really, really affected by injuries was the Denver Broncos. Now they weren't supposed to get to the Super Bowl this year, and they weren't in the Super Bowl last year. But Jared, I'll let you answer this question. What was the bigger injury for the Broncos? Their starting wide receiver Courtland Sutton, who has a torn ACL and he's out for the year, or the fact that their starting quarterback, their future Drew Lock, is out for a couple weeks? What's the bigger injury between those two guys?
That's tough. I don't know if I can say one over the other, right? When you look at Drew Lock, obviously he kind of took over the starting reins at the end of last season. I believe it was the last 5 or 6 games, and he went like 4-1 or 5-1, right? So he gave a lot of hope going into this offseason that Denver found their franchise starting quarterback. And then even, all of this training camp, it was nothing but positive outlooks coming out saying Drew Lock looked really good. So I think anytime a quarterback goes down, because, the quarterback is the most important player on anyone's team, I think I would have to lean towards Drew Lock. But then, when you look at Cortland Sutton, I'm looking at Denver's depth chart right now, at least receiver-wise. They do have Jerry Jeudy, who is obviously their first-round pick from this year. But week 1 against the Titans on Monday Night Football, Jerry Jeudy had 2 drops. Now, I don't know if it was because it was his first NFL game, it was Monday Night Football, the lights were a little too bright. I'm not really sure, but I think he's still finding his own way, right? And I think, Cortland Sutton will hopefully still be there in the meetings and there to kind of guide Jerry Jeudy. But Cortland Sutton also took a lot of pressure off of Jerry Jeudy to where now, if you're a defense, you're automatically double teaming Jerry Jeudy. And you're saying, go ahead, let Deshaun Hamilton beat me. I'm looking at the Denver Broncos depth chart right now. Let Tim Patrick beat me. Let Deontay Spencer beat me, right? I'm not afraid of any of those guys. So even though they do have other weapons, Melvin Gordon, you have Noah Fant, the tight end, who's playing really well. I'm gonna say Drew Lock, but I think Cortland Sutton is a big loss as well, because when you had Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, those were two outstanding wide receiver tandem, and now you take that away, and it's basically Jerry Jeudy having to kind of pick up his learning pace as a rookie.
Yeah, no, that's actually the biggest thing, at least for me. I'm not really going to answer this question, but what I was thinking in my head was that Jerry Jeudy is not ready to play yet in the NFL as the number 1 receiver. And losing Sutton, yes, now Judy's going to have number 1 corners on him all the time. So it's really, really going to be tough for Sutton, but obviously the loss of a quarterback, just as bad. Do I think Denver has a chance at the playoffs anymore? No. But I think Jerry Jeudy's development might end up being hindered a bit more than we think here, more than, say, Drew Lock being out for 4 weeks. So I actually would pick Cortland Sutton being the bigger injury there. All right, another big injury. These last 2 guys are, mainstay names, both in fantasy football and in real on the field. Their teams might not be that good, but they're still big-time guys. Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey. I will at least answer this question like Jared just did. What's the bigger injury? I think it's Christian McCaffrey, because when you look at Christian McCaffrey, not only do I believe that the Panthers would have a better chance at making the playoffs this year, but the more and more Christian McCaffrey gets hurt, it just doesn't look good for his overall future and the Carolina Panthers' future, because if there's one guy in the NFL that you could say maybe is overused even with his talent, it's Christian McCaffrey. I mean, they throw McCaffrey into the wolves on some plays in Carolina. Now, they played a good defense in Tampa Bay, but this is the kind of stuff, Jared, that they did to Christian McCaffrey last weekend. It's 3rd and 17, and they threw like an easy screen for McCaffrey just to get lit up by 4 Tampa Bay defenders. Carolina needs to figure out other weapons to use, or Christian McCaffrey will be injured a lot more in his career, and he will not end up being the type of player that we want him to be. Who, at least out of those 2, Jared, did you think the bigger injury was here?
You bring up an interesting point, and I didn't really think about this when I was kind of formulating my argument, but you brought up the divisions, right? And to me, when I'm looking at the NFC South, the division at the Carolina Panthers, and I think they're easily the worst team. And even with Christian McCaffrey, there's no way in hell they're making the playoffs. When you've got Drew Brees and the Saints, Tom Brady and the Bucks, and then, even though the Falcons are 0-2, they still have a lethal offense, right? So the Panthers would almost have to play a perfect season just to get to the playoffs. And that's with Christian McCaffrey. Yeah. So you take him out of the equation, and you guys might as well be in the Trevor Lawrence sweepstakes, right? Head coach Matt Rule, it's your first year, and go ahead, just try whatever you want now, because you guys aren't making the playoffs. No way. If you're the Giants and you're in the NFC East, like you've mentioned, Nick, and I will second you and agree with that, with this statement, being one of the, if not the worst division in all of football, right? You may be able to get in the playoffs with 7 wins or 8 wins. right? Now, when you obviously take away Saquon Barkley and the huge name that he is, and he plays in New York, which is such a big market, right? And he's a likable guy, right? I don't think the guy's ever done one thing wrong in his life. But when you look at the Giants roster, Daniel Jones has actually played very well, better than I think most people thought. And you got they have Darius Slayton, right? Their late round draft pick of a couple years ago, who has kind of come on and really been their number one receiver now, right? Alongside Sterling Shepard, Golden Tate, and Evan Ingram. So yes, it's a devastating loss for the Giants, but I think they have some better weapons around them to where they could have a better opportunity of rebounding. To whereas when I look at the Carolina Panthers roster, you're right, it's Christian McCaffrey and not much else. They've got DJ Moore, but in reality, they use Christian McCaffrey in so many ways that now you take him out of the equation, and it's like, oh my gosh, we have to go back to the drawing board because Christian McCaffrey was in every single play that we had, right? So, and like I said, the Giants, because they're in such a weak division, and even though they're 0-2, you can't rule out the Giants because the rest of the division is just so bad, right? And I'm talking about my own Cowboys, who should be 0-2 right now, and they're lucky to be 1-1. So I'm going to say that Saquon Barkley was the bigger loss because the Giants had a better opportunity to make the playoffs, in my opinion.
Yeah, very, very interesting there. I just think for the future of both these guys, Jared, let's build around them. Like, come on, stop having these guys just like thrown out into the wolves every week. I mean, what was it? Barkley had like 15 yards the other day rushing, but he's catching like 13 balls. I mean, it's just, I know the NFL's changing, but like, let's spread the ball around a little bit. Like, these guys are good. Use them in the big moments. Don't use them on 3rd and 19, right?
Yeah,
like,
I'm going to say this one thing about the Carolina Panthers. They are lucky as hell that Christian McCaffrey is so loyal to them. And I almost equate this to Mike Trout and the Angels. Now, I think Mike Trout is, you could both say that they're both superstars in their own right? But Mike Trout with the Angels, he could have easily left and gone to any other team and who knows, probably gotten the same contract and been on a better team and probably had a better opportunity to win a World Series earlier in his career, because the Angels obviously aren't winning anything in the near future, right? And I think with Christian McCaffrey and the Panthers, it's the same concept. They're in more of a rebuilding stage, and it's probably going to be 3 to 4 years before this team is relevant and in that contending stage again. Yeah. Christian McCaffrey is so faithful and loyal that he said, hey, I'm going to sign a long-term extension with you. Yes, he got his money and he's getting paid, right? But he is basically saying, I'm willing to stick out this rebuilding process. So I think the Carolina Panthers need to be thanking their lucky stars. And when he does come back, you're right. They do need to really sit down and figure out how they are best utilizing him, right? Because, like I said, man, I think he could have easily said, you know what? I'm not signing a contract extension with you guys. You guys are going to be rebuilding for the next 3 to 4 years. I'm in my prime. I'm trying to win. And, I wouldn't have faulted him if he left, but that just shows the type of character, like I said, and the loyalty that he has. So I just wanted to bring that up because, for him to get injured like this, even though it's not for the season, it is going to be 3 to 6 weeks. And it's just, it's devastating. It's tough to see.
Yeah, the one difference here is that McCaffrey isn't out for the season. Barkley is out for the season and will be affected most likely next season. It's usually how ACLs work too. So really not good for the Giants, but at least the Giants are sort of on the up and up. The Panthers are in their first year of the rebuild. So you're right. McCaffrey signing with them. Hook him up. Don't make this a Landry Luck situation. All right. So we're running a little low on time, Jared. So let's kind of go through week 3 a little quickly. And instead of kind of discussing the entire Chiefs-Ravens game like we wanted to, simple answer for you, or simple question for you. Who needs this win more? Even though it's week 3, who actually needs to win this game more?
Wow, that's a good question. Man, I'm gonna say the Ravens. I'm gonna say the Ravens need this game more, and simply for the fact that I think their division now, not the division, one team in their division is potentially going to be a very lethal and very good team going forward in the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I think that they could potentially contend with the Ravens for that division, depending on how things shake out. To whereas when you're looking at the West, yeah, the Chargers are good, but they're going to have a rookie quarterback starting eventually in Justin Herbert. I really don't see Tyrod Taylor starting much longer. And eventually, when teams start to figure out the book on Justin Herbert, I think he's going to go through some struggles. So, you've got the Raiders who are 2-0, but do you really trust the Raiders to be good throughout the regular season, right? When was the last time that they were, let alone good, in the playoffs? It's been a while. And obviously, the Denver Broncos are, hurt with injuries and just are not going to make playoffs either. So I think for the Chiefs, if they lose this game, it's like, okay, we're down 2-1, but it's still early in the season. Our division is not as good. For the Ravens, I think they're kind of looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers like, this team is legit, right? We saw Pittsburgh opening week Monday night against the Giants. That defense was like the steel curtain defense of the 80s, right? They were phenomenal. And then they've got Ben Roethlisberger back. Juju Smith-Schuster is playing really well. James Conner's playing well. Their own version of a three-headed monster there. So I think the Ravens need this game a little bit more. They're at home, right? Lamar Jackson, MVP, all this stuff. He's been better passing the ball so far in the first 2 games of the year. So I think if the Chiefs win, I'm not going to be surprised because it's just the Chiefs and it's Patrick Mahomes. And not to say that I'd be surprised if the Ravens won. It's just the Ravens are at home. And you take care of home field advantage regardless of if there's fans or not. So yeah. I think the Ravens need this game a little more because of division seeding.
You know what? It's interesting you bring up seeding because this is where I'm going to decide mine. I'm going to have to disagree with you, Jared. I think the Chiefs need to win this game more, and it's because of seeding. Remember, this year in the NFL, specifically in the playoffs, there aren't 2 teams that get byes. There's only one. And when you're looking at teams legitimately in the AFC that have a chance to get that number 1 seed, it's the 2 teams playing here on Monday night, most likely, the Chiefs and Ravens. They're not going to play twice because they're not in the same division. So I think the Chiefs, with a more difficult schedule, you'd say, coming up, and in the harder division to play, because even I'll tell you this, I was high on the Broncos beginning of the season. Now I didn't think they'd lose their top receiver, and I didn't think they'd lose their quarterback. So a little different now. That team will fight and that team will battle. It's still hard to play in altitude and all that stuff. And then you look at the Raiders, better than usual, at least this year, and the Chargers will compete. They still have a good defense. You mentioned the Steelers are good, but I don't think they're that good. The Browns are whatever, and the Bengals are terrible. So I think the Ravens are going to have a lot more wins coming up. The Chiefs might have a lot more losses. So to even out those 2, at least if they end up with the same record, the Chiefs can say they beat the Ravens to be that number 1 seed. So that's what I'm looking at here. I think the Chiefs need to win this game more than Baltimore.
Hey, I was going through both of their schedules, and, for the first 3 quarters of the season, both schedules are pretty brutal, right? They've got some good matchups. I believe both teams play the Patriots, so and some other teams as well. But I'm looking at the Ravens schedule, and the last 4 games of the season, here we go, Nick, at the Browns, versus the Jaguars, versus the Giants, at the Bengals.
But that's,
yeah. So, you're right, man. The Baltimore can lose a couple games. They can afford to lose a couple games midway through the season because the last quarter of the season, they're going to go 4-0.
Yeah.
No doubt. There's no way they're losing to the Browns. No way they're losing to the Jaguars. No way they're losing to the Giants without Saquon Barkley. The Bengals, who knows? Joe Burrow is very good, but the Bengals are still going to bangle, and it's a division game. So, yeah. Ravens are going to go 4-0 to end the season, and so they can probably afford to, lose a game or 2 earlier on.
Yeah. Nonetheless, Jared, I got Rams Chiefs vibes on this one. You remember that game from a couple years ago?
No doubt. That Monday night game, no doubt.
You know who doesn't remember that game? Me, because I didn't get to see it. It's the one regret I have from the last 5 years of football that I didn't get to watch that game. I was busy with, at the time, more important things. Looking back on it, no, I should have watched that game. But nonetheless, I was even in LA, too. It was just not good. So I cannot wait for this game. And I already have my DVR set, and I'm already clearing plans for this Monday to watch this game. I can't. I'm excited. And whoever wins, it will still be a good game. Jared, week 3, tell me, besides that game, of course, on Monday, tell me another game you're interested in here for week 3.
Just going on the schedule here, I'm looking at 2-0 teams and the Rams and the Bills. And, the Rams look really good so far. Rams, obviously, in your NFC West with the Cardinals. and that division obviously looks very good.
Go Bill.
Three teams are 2-1, and then you got the 49ers sitting at 1-1, right? So I think the Bills, Josh Allen is showing that he's for real, right? He can do more than just chuck the ball 80 yards. He can throw it with accuracy. Obviously, he can use his legs to run. He's huge. He's like another Cam Newton. He's like a white Cam Newton, right? Yeah. You're not going to be able to arm tackle this guy. You have to gang tackle him with like 3 or 4 dudes to bring him down. So I think this is going to be a good early season matchup, with the Rams traveling into Buffalo to play. So that's kind of the game that I'm looking at, is to see, all right, the Rams beat the Cowboys week 1. They whooped on the Eagles last week. Now this is probably their real first test going up against a real good team in the Buffalo Bills that are sitting at 2-0. And we'll see if the Rams can really kind of cement themselves. If the Rams come out and beat the Bills, the Rams are legitimate. I'm going to say that, at least early on, right?
Yeah.
So I'm really looking to see if the Rams can respond and continue on this run they have going.
I will say this. Interesting thing about this game that a lot of people might not know. The Rams just played the Eagles in Philly. Normally, you'd stay on the East Coast. But because of COVID rules, the Rams had to come all the way back here to L.A. and then fly all the way back to Buffalo. That's going to be a thing there. It's also a 10 a.m. start for an L.A. team as well. This does not go well for the Bills.
You're right. I didn't think about that, and you're right. But that's interesting. And even though it's technically in different cities, the San Francisco 49ers, who we talked about earlier on the show, they get to stay in New York. Now they're playing in the same stadium, and I'm sure they're staying in the same hotel. So I don't know if that makes a difference or not, because they probably don't have to actually relocate at all. But still, they get to stay on the West Coast. So why couldn't the Rams just go directly from Philly to Buffalo and quarantine in a Buffalo hotel for a day and then go from there? That doesn't make sense to me.
Jared, the NFL doesn't make sense a lot. Even with the masks and all that stuff, which we're not going to discuss on this show, but it's even up for debate what's going on with the coaches and players with fines and all that stuff too. So weird, quirky thing, but I just want to mention that about that game, Jared, because that's important to think of. And West Coast teams going to the East Coast, it's an underrated factor that not a lot of teams have. It's an unfair advantage for West Coast teams, all of them, to be honest.
No doubt.
Something to look at there. All right, my game to end off week 3 and end off our NFL segment. Let me just turn off this little clock here. I got a Lakers clock going here to tell us when the game's about to start. I don't want it to go off.
I got it. Nick's turned into a Lakers fan now.
Yeah, we're good on time so far. But Sunday Night Football, Packers at Saints. A lot of the discussion today here, Tuesday when we're recording, has been about Drew Brees. And when you look at this game, on paper, it's Drew Brees versus Aaron Rodgers. It's the two of the best teams in the NFC. But will Drew Brees show up for this game? Because Aaron Rodgers has absolutely showed up the first 2 weeks for the Packers. They're averaging 42.5 points per game the first 2 games. And they're 2-0, and they're looking to be potentially that number 1 seed right now in the NFC conference. So this game's going to be interesting, singularly for what Saints will show up. Is it going to be the Saints of old that used to go toe-to-toe with the Rams in the playoffs and really were Super Bowl contenders? Or is it going to be Drew Brees and the Saints that have showed up the first 2 weeks and haven't looked that good? Even though they beat the Buccaneers week 1, you can kind of blame that on Tom Brady and the Buccaneers, the reason that game ended up that way. A brutal loss last night to the Raiders. If you're the Saints, really just the thing about this game is, will the Saints show up? Because if they do, this will be a really good game. If they don't, the Packers are going to be 3-0 and the Saints are going to be 1-2, looking at what the heck is going on with them. It's going to be very interesting.
The Saints need to listen. The loss of Michael Thomas with that high ankle sprain obviously didn't play last night. The Monday night game against the Las Vegas Raiders, I almost said the Oakland Raiders, was a bigger factor than I think they expected, right? Obviously, you've got Drew Brees, Alvin Kamara, and that defense is still pretty good, so you kind of expected them to pick up the slack. And Michael Thomas showed how much, how valuable he really is to that team. And so, Michael Thomas never wanted to miss a game. He said he wanted to gut it out. Obviously, the Saints, with the contract that they gave him, they want to protect him from himself. And so he is probably more than likely going to miss this Packers game as well. And so it's going to be up to the Saints offense to be a little more creative and get their players involved. Emmanuel Sanders, the free agent receiver that came over to New Orleans this offseason, caught one pass in the game, and it was in garbage time. It was in the fourth quarter with like less than a minute left. Like, how do you not get Emmanuel Sanders more involved when Michael Thomas is not in the game? So if you're the Saints, figure it out, right? You got the hot Packers coming in. Figure it out, man. But you're right. That's going to be a very good Sunday night game. But Sunday night, Packers Saints. Monday night, Chiefs Ravens. Woo!
Hey,
good football coming up this week.
125 Cowboys Seahawks. 2.
Let's go, baby.
Yeah, I got my Cardinals to watch too. 125 too. They've been rolling.
And you're going to be rooting for my boys this week because they're playing Seattle. So
100%. No, 100%. Jared, we get into 5-0. This is kind of crazy, right? We're not going to get into that. We got to get into the Lakers, but you never know. You look at that schedule. Cardinals got Detroit, Carolina, and the Jets. So I hope at least if Gase sticks around, stay to week 5 when we can whoop their ass in that game at least. Yeah, without McCaffrey too in Carolina, it's just it's looking interesting. But I shouldn't say it too much because then we'll lose like 2 games or something like that crazy.
Yeah, you don't want to.
All right, Jared. Tell me what you think. How this Lakers series 2-0. We got about 5-10 minutes before this game starts. We really got to get this rolling. But game 3, I'm talking about Anthony Davis with a big shot, game-winning shot. Your thoughts on the Lakers and how does this series end up?
The series, I think the Lakers go 4-1. I think the Denver Nuggets do get a game. I can't tell you which one it is. If the Nuggets are to win a game, I think it's tonight. The Nuggets obviously had a very close game. Anthony Davis had to hit that game winner. And the Nuggets, if it wasn't for that kind of blown defensive coverage, really should have made it more of a contested shot for Anthony Davis. And the Nuggets really should have won that game. So I think if there is a game for Denver to win, it is tonight because I think they're still feeling confident knowing that they played well in game 2. It's just the Lakers, the superstars shine when they need to, right? And they were in their Black Mamba jerseys. So kind of all the stars aligned for them in that game. But I think this will be the toughest game, right? Not necessarily the closeout game, potentially if the Lakers win game 3 tonight. I think this is the toughest game right here because Denver's basically saying we don't want to go down, 3-0 again or get in another elimination scenario, even though they've come back twice already in this postseason. It's just for them to come back from 3 different elimination series is almost unheard of. And so I think you will see a tough, resilient Denver Nuggets team tonight, and the Lakers are really going to have to come out strong.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a tough game. At least as a fan of basketball, I hope the Nuggets aren't demoralized, and I hope this series doesn't end up being a sweep. I agree with you. I think this ends up being 5 games at most, unless Jamal Murray turns it around. Because, Jared, as we know, Jamal Murray has taken over a couple games here in this playoffs. He's already had 4 40-point games. Unfortunately, in this series, he hasn't topped over 25 points yet. And he hasn't gotten a double-double in the first 2 games either. Jokic has still played well. Yeah, exactly. Jokic has played well for the Nuggets. So if they can just get Jamal Murray going, I think they could maybe even win 2 games in this series. I mean, if Murray scored 40 or 50 points, which I doubt will happen, it's going to be tough for the Lakers to win, especially if Jokic is playing. The other thing about this is if Anthony Davis keeps playing like he is, the Lakers won't lose another game in these playoffs. I'll just say that. And that's coming from a guy that really does not want to have to cheer for the Lakers after what happened to him last week on multiple podcasts. But I'm a sports fan, and I would love if the Lakers did win a championship this year with everything that went on with Kobe, LeBron getting another title, all that stuff. I'm rooting for the Lakers still. But to make this series a little interesting, I would like to see Murray step up. It's going to be interesting. But yeah, game 3 is starting in a couple minutes, so we'll get it going. But yeah, I don't think this goes past game 5. I think the Lakers are set, at least until to make the finals. The finals will be interesting because you either have a good young Celtics team or an up and coming kind of a unbelievable Heat team so far. But as far as the Western Conference Finals goes, I got Lakers in 5 as well. All right, that's the end of this podcast. We hope you enjoyed the Lakers game tonight, and we hope you enjoyed this NFL, preview of Week 3 and analysis of Week 2. And it should be a big week, especially later on Sunday, and of course going into Monday, some of those big games. So for the Cover 2 podcast, I'm Nick Nenad.
I'm Jared Smith.
And we'll see you next week with some more great sports talk. See you guys.